Hi there, and welcome to Enterprise Software Innovators, a show where top technology executives share how they innovate at scale. In each episode, enterprise leaders share how they're driving digital transformation and what they've learned along the way. I'm Evan Reiser, the CEO and founder of Abnormal Security.
And I'm Sam Motamedi, a general partner at Greylock Partners.
Today on the show, we're bringing you a conversation with Munir Hafez, Chief Information Officer at TransUnion. TransUnion specializes in credit reporting, fraud detection, and data analytics. With a team of over 19,000 employees and over $3.6 billion in annual revenue, the company impacts more than 1 billion people worldwide. In this conversation, Munir shares his thoughts on AI transforming business operations at TransUnion, balancing the potential of AI against the current hype cycle, and the future impact of AI in the enterprise. So Munir, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today. I was really looking forward to this conversation. We'd love to obviously talk a little bit about TransUnion, but before we dive in, do you mind sharing a little bit about kind of your background, your career, and how you got to where you are today?
So I started off many moons ago, several decades ago, as a software developer. So I spent my first 10 years really kind of cutting my teeth on hardcore software development in the telecom industry. Not to date myself, but the first product I worked on was Caller ID. So that probably tells you how long I've been in the business. And then from there, I went into the Big Four, PwC, Deloitte, and EY. Spent about 15 years across them doing large-scale implementation, strategy, really trying across, as I'm moving from role to role, work towards my future state or end state that I wanted to be. I knew for a while that I wanted to get into a CIO, CTO role where I could have large-scale influence both on business outcomes, right? But also I really enjoy working with teams and helping them grow and seeing them reach their potential. So I had sort of a vision where I wanted to be, and I tried to chart sort of having different experiences from operational roles, strategy roles, engineering roles, PMO roles, to try and round out my experience to hopefully get me ready to, where I got to a few years ago as a CIO. From there, I went back into industry. I was in automotive for a few years working on self-driving cars. So that was very interesting work. You don't always get the opportunity to potentially change society with capabilities like that. Of course, that hasn't quite materialized as everybody had hoped for, but certainly
going in the right direction.
Yeah, so it was very cool technology to work on for sure. And then from there, I joined TransUnion about 3 years ago. TransUnion is a global credit bureau data analytics company that provides data, fraud, marketing, in about 36 countries, I think, around the world. And, we have data on over 1 billion people worldwide. So very heavy technology footprint, very heavy data analytics footprint. Our organization is probably, I would say, 5,000 plus developers. So, we're more of a tech company than really anything else, and rely on technology to be cutting edge and be competitive in the market.
There's a cliche in technology that, bigger companies, especially in, regulated areas, are kind of slow and they're going to really, put all the red tape as possible. So nothing can happen, right? This side of the spectrum, the cliche is startups are the Wild West. They move quickly, but everything is messed up, if not illegal, right? And it's like the Wild West and it's a bunch of cowboys, right? I think the example you gave, right, is is a good example of kind of like the balance, right? And so, given just the nature of, the sensitive nature of your guys' work, right? It affects businesses, it affects a lot of people. There's obviously a bunch of regulatory privacy issues, right? That I know you guys take super seriously. A lot of those, I think, could be seen as impediments to innovation. But the example you just gave is actually a great example of where there's kind of like a best of all worlds, right? If you figure out how to innovate to get both. Do you mind talking a little bit about how do you kind of build that culture, right? Because I think, by default, you might end up on one side of those spectrums. And it seems like, you guys have been able to figure out kind of like the 80-20, right? Figure out some balance there. Like, how do you kind of, right? It takes more than just like some good direction from you. It requires kind of a culture of your staff and your leaders and the organization. Like, how do you kind of like, create that culture, especially in an organization that's been around for a long time when technology is changing so quickly?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is I think the partnership with the information security organization is super important. So I have a very close relationship with our CISO, Bill Shields. We work very closely together to find that balance, right? Under no circumstances are we going to undermine our cybersecurity posture. At the same time, we want to be able to do things in a way that is secure. So give you an example. When I came into TransUnion 3 years ago, we didn't have BYOD for mobile devices. It was deemed insecure. Technology has moved along. Microsoft with Intune has provided really good ways to containerize the applications and be able to protect them, and in a BYOD mobile setting, allow that access so you can have productivity on the go. So only about 40% of the organization had a TU phone. So you can imagine 60% of the population, we have about 19,000 people worldwide, 60% of that population had no mobile access. So unless they're sitting in front of a laptop or somebody's calling them, they had no idea what was going on or could be productive for work, right? So we worked very closely with information security to find that balance. What compensating controls can we put in and not compromise on the security, but allow BYOD devices in the mobile space. So that partnership, I think, is really, really critical with information security in particular. It's a very special partnership. But the other piece, we brought in Frog, which is a design firm originally from Germany, bought by Capgemini not too long ago, to come in and actually interview. And we created an advisory board from our associates. Different levels, so from the entry level to SVPs, people who travel a lot like sales, people who never travel, people who are always in the office, people who are remote, different countries. So we created a group of about 40 people that had all of the different mixes, and then we interviewed them to understand what are the pain points, what are the things that are an impediment to them moving as fast as they possibly can to be productive. And from there, we created a multi-year roadmap for how do we deliver. And actually, Gartner did a study on the work that we've done in terms of the extent that we went to make it human-centric, and how do we enable and empower associates to be productive. So from there, it was really a constant hammering. What is DAX? What is the digital associate experience associated with what you're doing here and here? So you can shout from the top, right? Culture comes from the top, so you can certainly set that from the top. But where it really comes in is every time something you do, your organization is doing something, you have to make sure to remind them of the impact of what they're doing. An example is patching, right? Patching is super critical. We were rolling out patching with a new tool called Manage Engine, and the way it was interacting with the user, not allowing them to postpone the patching. I'm like, think about that as a user, right? Like if you're in the middle of a meeting and we're forcing you to reboot, like that's not a good experience, right? So you really have to hammer it time and time again until people start, it just becomes second nature, right? So it's part of cultural change. Change management is always very difficult. So you have to set a good North Star, but you have to follow up with the examples. You have to stay on top of it. It probably took 12 to 18 months to make DAX sort of like people having nightmares about them, at night, in my team, right? Like everything has to be from that lens, because that's what we're here to do, right? Our job as a technology organization is to enable the rest of the business, right? That's what we're here for. They pay the bills. And to do that, we have to look at it. And what I've seen in a lot of organizations is it becomes very IT-centric, right? And self-serving, right? Like this is the easiest way we can do this. It's the cheapest way. And this is all the people that we have, so we have to do it that way. It's not really looked at from the end user perspective. And I think that becomes really critical to be able to constantly hammer that home every time you're rolling something out. What is the impact? Another example, we did Wi-Fi, a guest Wi-Fi, and they were allowing people to create guest accounts. But what about the use case of, you're a user, you're bringing in a vendor, and there's 20 people? Is everybody going to create their own account, right? So we had our associates sitting down creating 20 accounts, so every one of those could, right? Versus create a group account that can be shared, right? So it's the little things that make the difference. Yes, you have guest Wi-Fi, but is it user friendly? Maybe not so much. So I think you have to pay attention to the little details, and that's what takes a good experience to a great experience.
We are in arguably the biggest hype cycle, right, around AI. A lot of people we've had on the show and a lot of your peers agree with that. They also agree like, hey, we're getting real wins in some kind of tactical areas. And so there's like needles in the haystack, right? There's a lot of like nonsense. Hey, where do you think we are in that kind of hype cycle, as you sit here in July 2024?
I think we're really at the peak of it, right? So we've started down the path of AI, as I'm sure every other company has, and we've started down a few areas. We started off, we are piloting Bing Copilot as well as Microsoft 365 Copilot, right? And Microsoft 365 Copilot takes really good notes. It gives you action items, summaries, right? At the end of calls. So we're like, aha, why don't we use that to do knowledge transfer session? We don't need tech writers, right? Makes sense. So, you go through it and then it's like, well, it's not quite there yet, right? So what we've done with Microsoft 365 is created 6 weeks pilots. So licenses are not cheap. My personal opinion is that Microsoft overpriced Copilot at $30 a month. But we did pilots for 6 weeks, so people can come in, teams can come in and say, hey, I want the Copilot license. We give it to them. We do training. We have lunch hours with Microsoft at the table where we answer questions. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, we give them a survey like, okay, help us understand, how did this help you, right? The conclusion that we've come to in that particular case, and I've confirmed this with peers of mine, we talked with Gartner and others, I love the tool. It helps me prepare for the next meeting. It helps me define things. It helps me to do action items. Is it transformative? No. Is it a productivity enhancing tool that I'd love to have and I'll miss if I don't have? Does it buy me 10% productivity? Sure, right? I think the use cases that have worked really well are things that are around help desk, things that generate documentation, right? The most common one you hear is, editors and writers are getting fired left, and center, right? Some companies are making big claims. IBM, we're going to fire everybody. We don't need anybody, just AI. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I do think there are use cases where it's really good. We're doing the same thing. We're using it both for internal as well as for external. But I'll give you an example. Amazon went very heavy on that, right? I've been a long-time Amazon user. Used to love their customer support, be able to call in, talk to somebody, get issue resolved. Now it's almost impossible to get to a person, and you're going through an AI chatbot. Super frustrating, doesn't really give me what I need quickly enough. So I think
that was like a marquee strength. They were renowned for having like the world's best,
customer support. Yeah. So is it good for that? Yes. Is it going to replace people? Not yet. Same thing for me. Like, does it help a tech writer? Yes. Is it going to help me get rid of tech writers? No. So I think it really depends on how far the technology. Now the technology is moving very fast. I do think it also depends on whether you create a lot of grounding data and do your own LLM, right? So the LLMs that you get from ChatGPT, Microsoft, certainly the ones that are externally facing, right? They're using internet data. They're not grounded in your data, right? When you're using the Microsoft 365 Copilot, it uses the Microsoft Graph, so it does have some of your emails, SharePoint, etc. But I do think we've overestimated that it's ready for prime time.
Talk a little bit about kind of like the organizational consequences, right? And like, you just talk about like, even like the train, these kind of GPT training sessions, right? That was not a construct, right? 2 years ago, right? So as you look through like the next couple of years, I'd love to hear your perspective on kind of what you think Gen AI's impact is going to be on the workforce, right? Like, is there, presumably there's new training, there's obviously going to be new tools. Do you see kind of like new organizational responsibilities? Are we going to have a GPT knowledge manager in the future? Is that our knowledge management function, right, in the future?
So, I mentioned kind of the pilots that we're driving with Microsoft 365 to see whether we can realize the value to justify the cost. We're doing similar in other use cases in the business, in Salesforce, DocuSign, and many other tools where we're looking at business processes. We've identified like 88 business cases. we brought in Deloitte to help us because what I wanted to find is what is the use case that's going to provide me the best value, number one.
Yep.
Number two is where is the technology? My team supports over 500 applications. Everything has AI, including toothbrushes and trash cans have AI in them. So which tools are actually far enough along that it provides value versus everybody has AI, right? So we were looking for the triangulation of the technology is advanced enough, the business case makes sense, and the business users are engaged and are willing to learn and help support. So we've triangulated on 88 use cases. Obviously, there's still some skepticism in the organization. We said, okay, what's the one use case that we think we can bring to market in a couple of months where then we can get testimonials from the teams in terms of the value that's added. So we're looking to basically do a proof of concept so that we can start to generate excitement around what this tool can do so that we can start to reap the benefits of it, right? Start small, prove it out, and then start snowballing it, right? So that's kind of the approach we're taking. I do think prompt engineering is going to be real, right? And what the tools can and cannot do. I also think the LLM and the grounding of LLMs and having custom LLMs for the organization is how most organizations are going to get the most value out of generative AI. So I do think there's going to be centers of excellence, whatever you want to call it, right, that are responsible for bringing in the data. You said HR data, right? Engineering data, whatever it may be, put it into an internal LLM, train the ChatGPT on it or whatever solution that you use, and be able to get the most value. So I think there will be, in my mind, change management where you have sessions to be able to train people, educate people, particularly on how to do the prompts and get the value. And then a central organization potentially, or a COE type where you have people matrixed to be able to create and maintain the LLM so that you can get grounded with as much data that's custom to your organization so you can make the answers that it comes up with the most meaningful for you rather than more generic answers. If you're asking it how to bake a chocolate chip cookie, you don't really need to ground that in your data. If you're trying to say, hey, what cross-sell opportunities can I have for this customer, you have to be able to feed it your product catalog and everything else, right? I do think some of the tools need more grounding and more support, or you can get more out of it. You know, Copilot, Einstein Copilot in Salesforce, right, can help you pre-write emails and things of that nature, but you can also expand the prompts, right? But it takes a team that's going to do that, right? A team that understands, okay, if somebody's asking this question, then, you know, here's the type of data that I need to ground, right? So I think over time, it's going to get smarter and smarter where you need less and less grounding perhaps, or less prompt engineering that's teaching it. But certainly in the short term, I do think training, custom LLM, and then depending on the tool, like Salesforce, Einstein Copilot, teams that are designed and focused on extending the prompt engineering and the capabilities will be the best way to get the value. So I don't think, certainly not in the very short term, you're just going to plop in ChatGPT and voila, you're going to get rid of 50% of your population. At least in my mind, unless they're all sitting writing articles all day long.
One challenge a lot of, I think, organizations struggle with, including our own organization, is kind of like, when do you, like, the technology is evolving so quickly, and like there's new startups like building these really cool things. You got kind of the bigger platforms, doing things a little bit slower, but like they're making new things, or making, new enhanced, AI capabilities. How do you kind of know when to like build, when to buy, to partner, right? In an age where, like, again, every week there's a new technology, right? We've had a couple of, even take the, I know maybe it's kind of like more your bearish case, but on the customer support example, like today, right, I'm sure your team go hack together your own data, right, to, build, fine-tune a model on a ChatGPT, take a fine-tune ChatGPT model or OpenAI model. You could build something. You could go to like some new startup that does that, like as a very focused thing, or you can wait for Salesforce, ServiceNow to kind of mature their thing. And so, like, today, right, the answer may be obvious, but when you look through like what's the right decision to make today based on where you think we're going to be in 2 years, what type of use cases or what conditions in the environment would cause you to take one path over the other?
So there's a couple of things. So mentioning TransUnion's high degree of sensitivity across our cybersecurity posture, et cetera. So for example, we can't have contractually with our customers, we can't have any LLM be trained on any customer data, as an example.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So the challenge that you have with a lot of these products, to be used in a public company, for example, they may not have SOX compliance. They may train their LLM based on your data, right? So generally, right, in my mind, things that are competitive advantage, you build. Things that are more commodity, you buy, right? Nobody's going to build their own Workday HCM, right? You buy that, right?
That makes sense.
We're looking for our internal. We use Converso, a product that has GPT integrations. We hook that up to our SharePoint sites. We hook that up to Converso, so it can consume that data, and then when somebody's asking, that can give it a better answer. So in this space, certainly in the foreseeable future, I would look kind of the buy the base and build the extensions, build the LLM, and build the prompt engineering. I think there's going to be a bit of marrying of those two. I think as the technology gets better, you'll probably get more and more of that off the shelf. But certainly in the short term, I would see buying that and then being able to extend that with things that you build internally. Now, this is very much kind of the enterprise IT position, right? TransUnion on the product side has built a lot of generative AI capabilities and has for quite a while. So I'm not going to speak for that side of the house, but certainly on the enterprise IT side, the buy versus build, we generally err on the side of we buy it unless the cost factor is just starts to come in. But generally in enterprise IT, it makes more sense to buy and then extend.
I'm just curious about the kind of the use cases you're more, AI use cases you're more bullish or bearish about, especially relative to your peers. Is there anything like, if you met one of your kind of, fellow CIOs, right, of a, Fortune 500 company, like what would be the thing you'd say like, hey, if you're not thinking about using AI to this, for this use case in the short term, you're kind of missing out. And is there another side of that where you're like, if you're trying to apply AI to this use case in the short term, you're kind of, it's like, it's not a good use of time right now. Like what would be kind of on your like must do and don't do list?
I think on the must do is activities that have a lot of either text generation or consumption of text, right? So the customer service example, or generating a draft legal document, reviewing a legal document, summarizing documents, right? Sometimes you get 50 pages and you need to summarize the key points, right? So I think anything that it's really good at, right? Which is probably why a lot of what you hear out there is, well, it's generating stories and all editors are getting fired everywhere, right? Because it is pretty good at generating text, as well as consuming text and giving you summaries. I think it is super on that. In Teams, it does a really good job with Microsoft 365. Sometimes it's amazing, like when it gives you the summary and the action items, it's fantastic, right? Like you can just send it out and it's easy. But I think the other use cases where maybe there's a lot of grounding and there's still a lot of human thought that needs to go into the creativity of it. So would you want Salesforce to pre-generate an email for you? Sure, that's going to help you. Would you want it right now to just go send stuff to customers without your salespeople interacting with it? And no, you probably don't, right? So I think, will it eventually get there? No doubt it will. But I think in some of these cases, it will be more of a productivity enhancer, right? 10, 15%, 20%, not the I'm going to replace a lot of people, right? I do think there's going to be, some highly manual, repetitive work, accounts payable, accounts receivable, matching POs, bills, those kinds of things. I think image recognition, extracting content, comparing, I think it does really, really well on that type of use case.
If you kind of imagine where the world might be, in the 3 to 5 year time frame, what are some of the ways you think that, or maybe what's the most exciting way you think AI is going to transform how you operate the business at TransUnion that you're just excited about, or you think could have a major impact?
I think that over the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to go from a helper of developers writing test cases, documentation, certain functions, to writing entire capabilities. I do think in the next 3 to 5 years, it is going to exponentially improve, and it's probably going to put, and maybe that's a bit bullish, 3 to 5 years. That I wouldn't say that developers will be out of business in 3 to 5 years, but I do think it is going to go from a productivity tool to a massive boost to development efforts, or to quality of applications, right? Yeah. Chaos engineering, right? Finding errors in software that humans in normal testing cycle will take too long. So I think in those kinds of scenarios, I think AI will get really, really good at in the next 3 to 5 years, where it will replace a lot of manual activity today.
Okay, so I know we got limited time, and there is some audio upload issues, so I want to give Josh 5 minutes at the end just to kind of debug this, but maybe in our kind of last 5 minutes, love to do a lightning round. So looking for kind of the one tweet answer here. These questions are obviously impossible to answer in one tweet, so just please forgive me. But I got maybe 5 of them. So first question, how should companies measure the success of a CIO?
How much they're able to expand margin.
How should CIO best position themselves to best collaborate with the rest of the C-suite?
I think you've got to build yourself as a trusted advisor, and to do that, you really have to understand the business, right, and build the right relationships.
And so maybe switching gears to the personal side, what's a book that's had an impact on you? I'd love to hear what it is and why.
I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell. He has. I'm so bad with names, but I had Outliers, and he had several other books. But Outliers was one of the ones that I've reread recently. I read it when it first came out years ago, but I've reread it recently, and it's really interesting in terms of the lessons that it teaches you and how much in life is actually outside of your control.
What is an upcoming technology, or what is an upcoming new technology that you're personally most excited about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a trick question, right? Because you kind of have to say Gen AI, right? It's the most hyped technology out there. So I think that's going to hog the airwaves for a long time, just like digital transformation did for years, and service-oriented architecture did for years, right? There's always these, the big buzzwords for a couple of years that just kind of hogs the airwaves. I think it's hard to say anything about Gen AI probably for the next couple of years, as that then starts to get down into reality, right? And we're actually able to realize the value from the tools, right?
What do you believe will be true about technology's future impact on the world that most people would consider science fiction today? I'm looking for your kind of contrarian view. How do you think technology will change the world in ways that maybe other people don't?
I think technology, and going back to my days of working self-driving cars, I think one of the things that really excited me about how that can be transformational to society. Think about somebody who's disabled. Think about somebody who's elderly that has lost the ability to be able to have freedoms, right? Going to a grocery store or what have you, right? So there's a lot of scenarios, cases. 50,000 deaths every year from automotive accidents, right? So I see technology certainly in an automotive space. I'll use that as an example because that's one that is near and dear to my heart, having worked on it in several years, that can really save lives, and as well as empower a population that today is not able to take advantage of the freedoms of having a car that most of us kind of take for granted.
That sounds like an exciting future. I imagine it's going to be probably even more crazy than we think. So really appreciate you making time to chat. Hopefully get a chance to talk again soon. And appreciate you making the time.
Thanks, Evan. I appreciate you having me on.
That was Munir Hafez, Chief Information Officer at TransUnion.
Thanks for listening to the Enterprise Software Innovators podcast. I'm Sam Motamedi, a general partner at Greylock Partners.
And I'm Evan Reiser, the CEO and founder of Abnormal Security. Please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find more great lessons from technology leaders and other enterprise software experts at enterprisesoftware.blog.
This show is produced by Luke Reiser and Josh Meir. See you next time.